Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to your Lunch Break Live. My name's Ivana Harinkyu if you are new here, and if you're not, thank you for coming back. Today is July the 30th. We are almost to August 1st. That'll be next week. And we also are back into August, which means school is starting soon. We have had a lot of questions about schools and kids and coronavirus, especially with this Delta variant coming in. So today, I thought it would be a good way to end the week. Today, I'm joined by Dr. David Kimberlin. He is the co-director of pediatric infectious diseases at UAB and Children's of Alabama, what a lot of us just call Children's Hospital. Doctor, today we are going to go through kind of a rapid fire Q&A. I've had people email me questions. I've had people send questions via Twitter and other social media. So I thought, let's go through those questions. Any of our audience members, if you have a question for the doctor, drop it in the comments. I will keep an eye on it and I will ask. But first of all, Dr. Kimberlin, thank you for your time. I know you are busier than you'd like to be, but we've got a lot of questions for you.
Well, Ivana, I appreciate being with y'all today and look forward to these next few minutes to spend with everybody.
Well, let's just get going with one that is a little bit, might be the obvious question, right? And that is that the majority, I should say, of our cases right now, our COVID cases, are due to this Delta variant. So kind of in a simplified version, is the Delta variant more contagious to children than that original COVID strain that we've been dealing with now for a year and a half?
Well, you mentioned rapid fire short answers. The answer is yes, period. I can explain a little bit more. When people are infected with the Delta variant, they will have 1,000 times more virus in their nose compared with a year and a half ago if they had been infected with the regular first strain of this SARS-CoV-2 COVID virus. 1,000 times more virus in their nose. And that's what makes it more infectious. And what we're seeing right now as well, at least in some preliminary data out of the CDC, is that whether you're vaccinated or not, you can still have that amount of virus in your nose and therefore be capable of spreading to other people. That's the reason, I'm sure we'll talk about the mask recommendations coming out of CDC this week. That's the reason these mask recommendations are being modified and changed, is because the virus has changed.
So are kids at more risk of getting sick from this Delta variant than they were from the original variant? We've heard, especially at the beginning of this pandemic, oh, kids don't get that sick. Are kids more at risk now?
All of us that are not vaccinated in this country, in our viewing area, in our state, all of us are at more risk from this Delta variant. Now, I'm fully vaccinated, of course, but if I weren't, then I would be at much more risk of getting this because it's so much more easily spread. So for all of our children under 12 years of age, there's not an authorized vaccine for that group yet. All of them are at more risk. And then if you get into the adolescent years, the teenage years, if they're not vaccinated, they also are at more risk. Now, for each individual person who's infected, at first it looked like the degree of disease, the degree of illness that they would have was about the same with the Delta variant as with the original virus or the other variants that have developed prior to Delta. The most recent data that CDC has looked at, as I understand it, suggests that may not actually be the case, that actually the Delta variant not only is hyper transmissible, and I mean that hyper transmissible, but also that it causes more severe disease. Now, is that happening in children as well as adults? You got to think so. I mean, look up at Arkansas Children's Hospital right now. They've been dealing with this Delta variant for longer than we have. It's really inundated them. And their pediatric hospital there, which is quite similar to our pediatric hospital here in Birmingham, has more patients, more children, more adolescents admitted. They are overflowing with it than ever has been the case throughout this year and a half of the pandemic. This is different, folks. This is not last year's COVID. This is not even the horrible disease that we saw in January and February. This is even more. I've been doing this, Ivana, for, 28 years or something like that in pediatric infectious diseases and in virology. I am scared right now. I last year was very anxious. I was trying to get the word out. My dad died of COVID in November. It has devastated all of us. I am scared now. And I want people to hear that. Get vaccinated if you're 12 and over. Put a mask on when you're inside a room. I promise you, we are about to get hit by a wave, a tidal wave. And we need to do everything we can to protect ourselves and try to mitigate that, try to lessen that so that we can get to the other side as quickly as possible. And vaccines are the way to do it. And indoor masking right now is the way to do it, vaccinated or not.
Doctor, I'm very sorry to hear about your father and his passing. I do want to, I'll quickly shout out because we are talking about kids and teenagers getting vaccinated. One of my viewers, Grace, I see she is on here. She is a high school student going back to high school, I believe next week. And she told me the other day she has gotten her vaccines. We'll shout Grace out there here in the comments. But yesterday, and that was Thursday, for those of us who have lost track of the week, we had a representative from Children's of Alabama tell us that there were 32, or actually, I take that back. I'm not sure if that was a representative from Children's or from the state, but a representative did tell us that there were 32 children, including one infant, that were hospitalized across Alabama with COVID. So, doctor, 32 kids, one infant, that's a lot of kids. By any way, that's over 2 dozen. So my question to you is, do you see that number unfortunately increasing, or is there just, this is the worst it's going to get, we're going to go down from here?
No, it's going to increase. Even if we do all the right stuff right now, it's going to increase. I mean, think back. We now, all of us now are pandemic experts, right? Over the last year and a half, we have seen this, and we've seen this movie before. We're seeing the horror version of it. But we see test positivity go up. We see cases go up. We see hospitalizations go up. We see ICU admissions go up, and we see deaths go up. And it happens in about 1 and 2 week intervals between those two. So right now, cases have already gone up. Hospitalizations are going up, and that will continue for a while. And then deaths will go up.
I have a question for you about masks and school masks in schools. We know there have been several school districts across Alabama that have already said they are going to implement masks. I believe one of our biggest districts said they would implement masks for, I believe, at least a month until early September and then reevaluate. So is there any, in your opinion, side effects that kids can face from masking up in schools? Anything that they can get there that would be more risky than not masking up and possibly contracting COVID?
None. Zero. None. We're talking about a little piece of cloth or a little piece of paper in front of your face. This is obviously safe. And the noise out there and the hyperbolic kind of words that are used, like suffocating and stuff, that's just not true. I mean, that's just not true. And so what we need to do, and Ivana, I mean this. I have no crystal ball. But I do have a lot of experience that sort of informs what I anticipate happening. We will be masked in school. This wave that is about to hit us is going to be difficult at best, devastating at worst. And eventually schools will be masked. Now what I would suggest is, why wait? Why wait until it's so bad that you've emptied out your classrooms because everybody's at home again sick? Why wait until then? Do it on the front end, mask on the front end, and then that should be, when you're in any building, but obviously school, and whether you're vaccinated or not, schools being indoors, everyone inside that school should be masked, and that has a chance of then being able to stay in school. I mean, we all realize now that in-person learning is superior to virtual learning. That has been shown time and time again. The really awful side effects of this pandemic on children include the lack of educational benefits, the lack of socialization benefits. It includes, just the mental health issues and physical health issues of literally being away from people. We're a social species. We like to be around one another, and we benefit from being around one another. Children need to be in school, but they also need to be in school where they can stay in school. It doesn't do much good to start school and then have to ramp down real quick because of the rapid spread of this hyper infectious virus. And the way to stay in school is to be masked. I know that some districts are not necessarily embracing that right now. And what I would encourage parents and grandparents that are listening to this broadcast this morning to do is to call your superintendent and call your principal and call your teacher and say, I want my child or my grandchild to be masked in school. I want all other children and staff to be masked in school. They need to hear your voice. They're hearing a lot of loud voices, but those loud voices are a minority. Most people want their children, obviously, everybody wants their children to be safe. But most people realize that the best way to do that is masking, and the leaders of the schools need to hear you. They need to hear your voice.
And excuse me, my eyes go and I'm looking at all these comments coming in, and I've got, again, those in front of me. So I'm going to read a question I have from Lee. Lee says, if my children's school district is not requiring masks for students or taking any measures for distancing or quarantining positive cases, is masking my child enough to send them in person? She says, as a parent yourself, would you investigate other school options if my district is not taking precautions?
Well, Lee asks a very good question. My personal answer is, first of all, Lee, if your child's 12 or over, make sure they're vaccinated. If they're under 12, they obviously can't yet get vaccinated. There's not an authorized vaccine for the under 12 age group yet, although that may change over the next potentially couple of months, potentially. In the meantime, I do believe that the benefits of in-person learning are so great that children should be going back to school, and ideally in a situation where everyone is masked, but at the very least with their own mask on. And I say that primarily because, and all of life is a risk. When I drove to work this morning, it was a risk. I could have been in a car wreck and died. But I chose to do that. So we've got to look at the risks and the benefits, and the benefits of in-person learning are just so good, so great, so positive, that I think that we need to do our best to get our children there. And we also, though, need to use our voices, use our power, and parents have power to really reach out to the superintendent. Do it politely. I mean, we don't want to be angry and like this or anything, but let them know your concern and how you want them to be doing the right thing for your child. They want to do the right thing as well, but they've got to also, I realize, balance that flood of responses that come their way. Let them hear the people who want children to be in person and want them to be able to stay in person. And to do that, everyone needs to be masked, and everyone 12 and over needs to be vaccinated.
So again, I don't have children in school, but I remember being in school at one point, and lunchrooms are usually a big, maybe open area, but there are going to be presumably kids eating lunch, not with masks on. And then kind of on the flip side of that, you've got recess where most, and also PE, if kids are outside playing at recess in PE outside, what do you suggest about that outside time and about lunchroom time?
Well, lunchroom has been a challenge throughout this, because you can't eat through a mask. That's sort of a reality. Ideally, in lunch, separate out with the prior COVID virus. 3 feet was adequate. 6 feet's better, but 3 feet's adequate in terms of separation between one person and the next. I don't know with this Delta variant if it's going to stay that way or not. I simply don't know. But I think you've got to work with the best information you got, and that is to try to be distanced, try to be separated. Now, out on the playground is also a challenge. My recommendation would be to try to be masked if possible. I have seen, I think I mentioned before, I've seen this burn through groups of children outside who don't seem to be in close proximity to each other. And the only other virus, I didn't see the original COVID virus do that. There was some more, 15 minutes within 3 feet, the inside, the things that we're also familiar with now was what things were like through March into April and so forth of this year. And of course, all of last year. This one's different. This virus, this new variant is different. The thing that it's closest to for me that I remember was when I first started out as a physician, as an intern back in 1989 and 1990. The United States had its last very large measles epidemic, and this looks like measles to me. It's not that bad, it's scary. It's really scary. So I would try to stay in person in class, and I would try to be as maximally protected as possible.
Now, questions on vaccines for, we know again, 12 and up are eligible for some of these vaccines. We do have kids, I guess, in middle school and then in high school, starting at that 12, that kind of preteen age. Now, that preteen age, especially for boys, is an age where we have seen reports of some things from vaccines, including some heart conditions. So I've got a question on Twitter from Jason. Jason says, what are your thoughts on preteen boys receiving the vaccine with regards to those reports on the heart conditions? And is the risk over reward, what is that for a relatively healthy preteen boy?
Well, Jason asked a very good question. The definitive answer is the benefits of being vaccinated highly, strongly outweigh the very remote risk of any kind of heart condition following the vaccine, the mRNA vaccines, the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines. So let me walk through that a little bit. These heart conditions that we're referring to are called myocarditis and pericarditis. Myocarditis is inflammation of the heart muscle. Pericarditis is inflammation of the lining around the heart, the kind of sac that the heart sits in, if you will. And so when we first started to recognize that there seemed to be a very rare association between, especially the dose 2 of the mRNA vaccines, and myocarditis or pericarditis, it really was literally just within a matter of weeks after these vaccines were authorized and were being used in larger numbers of children. And that is a really positive statement about how sensitive, how sophisticated our adverse event tracking mechanism is in the United States. The CDC, the FDA, they have these tools, these electronic tools that are able to detect even exceedingly rare events like this myocarditis. So that's number one. I would suggest, number one, I'd rather it not happen at all, but if it's going to happen, I really want to know about it. And our systems allow us to see that, which is really, really beneficial. Number two, when it occurs, it is mild. When patients get admitted to the hospital with this vaccine-associated myocarditis, they're in for 2 days. They might get some ibuprofen, some Advil. That's the kind of treatment. A few get more than that. They go home, and as best we know, there's no long-term follow-up. On the other hand, if you're infected with COVID, you're much more likely to have heart events, and those heart events can have some lasting effect on a child. So the disease is worse than the vaccine in terms of likelihood. Vaccine-associated myocarditis is mild and goes away with minimal treatment, as best we can see right now. And in terms of risk, the best numbers we've seen most recently, and I'm one of the American Academy of Pediatrics liaisons to the CDC Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, the group that's receiving these data, looking at them, making recommendations. As best we've seen with the May meeting of the ACIP, I believe it was, with these numbers, it's for boys after a second dose, it's like 1 in 32,000 vaccinees will have this mild myocarditis within 21 days after getting the vaccine, the second dose of the vaccine. Think about this in terms of what that means. Your chance of getting struck by lightning in your lifetime is 1 in 15,000. So you are twice as likely to be struck by lightning within your lifetime than you are to get this very rare event. Now, it's not scientifically, that's not the best comparison, but I do think it's helpful for parents to get some sort of comparator of what we're talking about with the rarity of these things.
That's a good analogy, though. I like that when it puts things a little bit in perspective there. Now, a question here from Kyle. He says, what is the outlook for daycares as Delta progresses?
Kyle asked a good question as well. You got some great listeners, Ivana. These are tough questions. Right now, I am considering this Delta variant to be a risk to everyone who is unvaccinated, not so much a risk to people who are vaccinated in terms of moderate to severe disease or death. The vaccines are still highly effective at preventing, needing to go in the hospital or God forbid, dying from COVID. So get your vaccine. In the daycare setting, hopefully all the daycare workers are vaccinated. So that's different than it was a year ago when we didn't have these vaccines. It's a better place that we're in right now. I've got to think that at least based on what we know right now, and this changes day to day, but what we know right now does not suggest that toddlers are any less likely to get Delta than a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old or a 30-year-old or a 70-year-old. So I've got to think that the risks are going to be about the same. And the challenge is that, when you're under 2, probably you shouldn't mask. It's harder to get a mask that fits, and you can't, you do need to see their faces, those younger children, when they're more in that pre-verbal stage. So that, depending on what, age of daycare we're talking about, we'll have to be watching this very carefully. The best thing that we can do with daycare right now is make sure that, number one, everybody who works there is vaccinated. And number two, every parent that's dropping a child off at daycare, as is the case for every parent and literally every person 12 years of age and older, should be vaccinated. That's to protect yourself, and it's to protect those around us.
Now, I know that you answered this earlier. I just want you to repeat this because I have several people. I believe Carmen was one that asked. She says, are there basically any downsides to sending our kids to school, having the mask for 8 hours a day? Is that dangerous?
Yeah. Do you think the question is the masking dangerous?
Is the children having a mask on for the entire school day, is that dangerous for a child, more dangerous than the possibility of catching the Delta variant or just regular coronavirus?
All right, thank you. Masking is not dangerous at all. It's not dangerous at all. Not wearing a mask is very dangerous nowadays. And I say very, I add that in deliberately with this Delta variant. This Delta variant is not the same virus that was circulating last winter and last year. This is a mutated virus. It is every living thing tries to develop ways to make it more likely that they will survive over time, that their progeny will survive over time. Every living person and every living animal and every living plant and every living bacteria and every virus, which is sort of alive, does that exact same thing. They try to find a way to survive. And what this Delta variant has done in order to do that is it has found a way when a person first becomes infected to exceedingly quickly increase the amount of virus in your nose, 1,000 times more virus with the Delta variant than with the original strain of the COVID virus last year. And that means then that it can spread more easily to others. And if it spreads more easily to others, it's more likely to survive. That's the reason it's outcompeted the other versions, if you will, of the COVID virus over time. That will happen in schools. The only way to stop that is to not go to school. And that's not an option for us right now because children need to be in school. So the way you prevent it is you put a mask on everybody in schools. And also you put a mask on everybody in the grocery store and everybody in Walmart and everybody anywhere inside. That's where we are right now in America. It's not where we were 2 months ago, but the Delta virus, the Delta variant has got us there. And the other thing, I'm just going to speak the truth here. The other thing that's got us there is that in Alabama, 68% of people in the state are not vaccinated. And so, we have got to do better or else we're going to get what we get. And the way through this is an immediate phase is masking, and the longer phase is to get people who are not yet vaccinated. Talk with them about how much you care about them. Do it lovingly. Don't do it with a shaking finger. But you care about your neighbor. That's one thing I think we do, Ivana, very well in Alabama. We're faithful people. We care about one another. We're faith-based. And what's more in the major faiths of the world except, helping your neighbor. That's what we need to be doing here.
There's a question here, and I had to find it because it flew up in my feed here. And this is from Mandy. I think this is so interesting. And we know that right now vaccines are approved for 12 and up. So I'm going to assume that she is talking about somebody 12 and up. She says, are any of the vaccines safe for kids? Again, I'm assuming 12 and up, safe with kids with special neurological needs?
Yes. And what the American Academy of Pediatrics has said is that all children 12 and over should receive the vaccines. And it's got to be the Pfizer vaccine. That's the only one that's authorized for 12 through 17 right now. Moderna likely will be authorized very soon, but it's not yet. So the Pfizer vaccine, unless you're allergic to some component of it, and that is exceedingly unlikely. There is one particular aspect of what's in the vaccine that also can be in other medicines, usually that old people take. So it's really highly, and you could, I guess, theoretically be allergic to that, but it's highly unlikely. So everyone 12 and older should be vaccinated. And I would say, especially people who have at-risk conditions. I don't know about the degree of neurologic involvement here, but some neurologically involved children and adults too, will have a harder time fighting off an infection, a pulmonary infection, for instance, clearing out the lungs of the infection if they actually get COVID. And so the best thing to do is not get COVID in the first place. And the best way to do that is to get the vaccine. If a person is vaccinated, they are highly, highly protected against hospitalization and death. That's why we've got to keep doing the vaccine.
I'm going to give you just a few more questions here. One, Stephanie, if we've had the vaccine, can we still be carriers of the Delta variant?
Yes, and that's the reason, Stephanie, that the CDC made the change that it made on Tuesday. Now, I realize that throughout this pandemic, we in the health field, public health field, and so forth, have sometimes said one thing and then that has changed. And I apologize for that. I know that is frustrating for people. On the other hand, as we learn more information, wouldn't you want us to change what we're recommending? I mean, isn't that the whole purpose of developing new knowledge, is then to make modifications on what the prior recommendations were based on that new knowledge? So I think that the question that Stephanie raises is really the foundation for why the CDC and every other major medical group has said just in the last 48 to 72 hours that everyone should be masked indoors. And the reason is because even if you're vaccinated with this Delta variant, this new Delta variant, it can cause infection in the nose of someone who's vaccinated, cause high enough levels of virus in that person's nose that they likely can transmit it to someone else. And so now we've got to all put masks back on when we're inside until we get this Delta variant under some degree of control. Right now it's controlling us. And that is it may not be quite apparent to you yet, but it will soon. And Ivana, you and I were talking about some folks you'd heard of just over a 2-hour period. You may want to share that with your viewers as well. It's a great story in terms of where we are right now and how bad this is going to be getting.
Absolutely. I was telling Dr. Kimberlin here before we went live that I guess I woke up earlier. We can say I woke up around 7 and really got moving and had my phone. In between 7 and before he and I got started here about 10:30, I had heard of at least 3 people that I know that are that I do not believe have been vaccinated and who have been diagnosed with COVID. And so I'm thinking of them and hoping that they make swift recoveries here. But that's 3 people in just a few hours. So we know, and I've heard from so many people that are experiencing that same thing, doctor. And kind of to kind of wrap all this up, I love this question. It was from Asher, and it was, I think, just right at the beginning of our conversation, but it really wraps this whole question up, or this whole conversation up. And Asher says, is it time to vaccinate our kids? 12 and I believe 12 and older. And then is it going to be time soon for vaccines to be approved for 12 and under?
So for 12 and over, the answer is yes, it's time. The honest answer is it's past time. We've been able to do this since May, and hopefully for the listeners, your children 12 and over have been vaccinated. But if they have not, it is not too late. Please make the appointment today. It's easy to get this vaccine now, to find a place that's administering the vaccine. It does need to be the Pfizer vaccine for 12 through 17 years, because Moderna is only authorized for 18 and over. So yes, now is the time. Now, in terms of under 12, so initially it'll be 5 through 11, and then probably 2 through 4, and then 6 months through 1, up to 2 years of age. That'll be sort of how I anticipate we see it being authorized for younger and younger age groups. In terms of the next age group, which is likely to be 5 through 11, those studies by Moderna and by Pfizer are very, very far along. And I actually have one of about 4 or 5 people that'll be on a call with the FDA this afternoon to talk about sort of where they are. I've read that some of those studies now are going to need to be increased a little bit in their sample size in terms of how many children enroll. And I'm curious, I want to know what that's going to mean for our timelines. We hadn't been anticipating that, September, October, we would have enough data for the FDA to look at it and make a determination about authorization for the 5 through 11-year-olds. To my knowledge, that we're still on track for that, but I'm not quite sure what this, what this increasing of the sample size might mean in those studies. And some senior leadership of the American Academy of Pediatrics are going to be having this call with the FDA in a little while, so about 2:30 this afternoon. So I'm hoping to learn more then. In the meantime, we're not quite there yet for the under 12s. I think the FDA has done a very careful, very thoughtful, very thorough job in how they look at the data. I think the ACIP, that group that advises the CDC, has done a very thorough, thoughtful job in terms of how they're making recommendations. We're not to the point of recommending it under 12 yet. I think we'll be there, and I'm hoping we'll be there pretty soon as the school year starts. But we need to make sure that it's safe and that it's immunogenic. In other words, that the immune response in a younger child is what we want it to be in terms of protecting them against the disease too. We've got to follow the data. And really, for quite a while now, we've been following the data well. And that sometimes means putting a mask back on. That's what we heard this week. And it means we wait a little bit longer for the under 12s and the vaccine.
Dr. Kimberlin, I know that we could keep you all day. I know, though, you're a very busy man. One thing I want to remind everybody, we do have an email address we set up at AL.com. It's vaccines@AL.com. That's VACCINES, so plural vaccines at AL.com. You can send all of your vaccination questions there. We're matching them up with experts to get them answered and to get you that information from the source itself. So make sure that if we did not get to your question, you send it to that email, and we will get it answered as soon as possible. So Dr. David Kimberlin, co-director of pediatric infectious diseases at UAB and Children's of Alabama, we thank you for your time and for your knowledge on this topic.
Well, I appreciate the chance to be here with you today.
Thank you, Doctor. Everybody watching, thank you so much. Have a great weekend. Be safe, be nice to each other, and we will see you on Monday.